All right, so everybody have their piece of clay out, right? And it's like this big. Remember, it's new-ish clay. You don't want to use funky clay that you've used before. And I'm just going to start rolling it out in a coil like this. Now, a lot of times this process doesn't work so well, and you want the clay to be kind of wedged up. So a lot of times we did wedging, but this is really a too small amount. Like we could try just wedging with our fingertips, but it doesn't really work very well. So what I like to do with these to kind of get it wedged is to just make it into a short coil like that and then roll it up on itself. Do you see that? I rolled it up on itself, and then I'll squeeze it and make it quickly. So everybody should do that. Just do that like 5 or 6 times. And this way we're mixing up the clay, right? And getting it even, because that's one of the problems when we do this. When we make a handle in this technique, that the clay is a little bit hard on one side or hard on this side, soft on the other, that this will really help us get the clay ready. So hopefully everybody should be doing that now. Roll up the clay again. So we're all going to make a handle together, and we're not necessarily going to keep these handles. We're just doing it, right? Maybe one more time. So 5 or 6 times. All right, so I hope that's enough. Now, if I'm rolling out the coil and making the handle, anytime if I feel like I don't like it, I will stop and just start that process over again. So I have my coil. Now I'm going to start rolling out the coil. And I want this coil to be as neat and tidy as possible, as round this way as possible, right? The neater, the better it looks. So I'm using really light pressure. Now let me show you a trick here is I can get anything flat like this. Right, so I'm going to use a bat here, and I'm going to use that to roll, and I probably want it about my thumb, the thickness, this to be about the thickness of my thumb. So you see it's pretty close, but I'm going to use this bat, which is smooth on one side, and then this board, right, my tabletop area is smooth. I'm going to use this, and I'm just going to roll it back and forth. So I know you guys don't have one of these out because I didn't warn you that you needed one, but this will help me get it a little bit smoother. Right, and I want it as bestest as I can. Right, so here it's almost there. It's acting a little strange, so we'll go again. It's almost perfectly round. It's there almost, so there. So you see how beautiful my coil is. I want a nice, beautiful coil. Now, I can already tell that there's too much coil here, right, for me to make a one handle, and I don't want to work on a big, giant piece of clay. So I'm just going to rip it in half. So see how I just cut it in half? So now I have 2 pieces. So if your piece of clay is longer than your palm, right, then cut it in half. So here you can see that it's shorter than my palm, or I mean my fingers and palm together, right? So you see that? So it's like a little bit shorter. So that's what I want. And now what I'm going to do, so I'm going to be able to make 2 handles out of this piece of clay. So I take one away. And now what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to make it kind of like a carrot. So I'm using my thumb kind of as my judge, right? So you see how that piece of clay and my thumb are about the same size? I'm doing that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to thin out one side. So I'm just going to put pressure on this side to make like this carrot shape. It'll still be this chubby over here, but it'll be thinner over there. So here I'm just going to roll this out. You see that? And I spend more time on this side. I want it to taper from thick to thin, thick to thin. So I spend more time rolling, 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 like that. So that creates a nice tapering coil. And you see I'm not trying to thin this area out at all. I'm just thinning that. So everybody take a look at my special carrot. And you can see it's just tapering a little bit. Maybe I'll taper a little bit more. All right, so that's my carrot. Dun, dun, dun. And then what I could do is just flatten it out. So I could use my palm of my hand to flatten it out like this. Just push, 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 just to kind of make it kind of flat, right? So that kind of gets me kind of handle looking, right? You see that? So everybody see that now? Everybody take a look. It's kind of flatter in one direction than the other. Right, you see that? I'll keep spinning it around so you guys could see, right? So now, if you look at it, it's kind of handle-like, you see that? But it should be probably a little fat all the way around. So what we're gonna do now is make it look more beautiful. So this is where we kind of diverge, because we've done all those things before, right? So now, take your handle and hold it in your offhand. So what I mean, this is my hand that I don't use so much right here, right? this hand, and then this is my active hand. So hold it over the top with your non-active hand. That makes sense? Like that. And then keep this hand free, your other active hand. So take this part and dunk it in the water, except don't dunk your hand. Keep this part dry. So you see it, dunk it in the water. Bloop. So all from down here is wet. My hand is dry so I can hold on to it. And then take your active hand and then dunk that more. Bloop, like that. So now this is wet, the handle's wet, and then do this, like thumb and index finger. And so everybody watch for a second that I'm going to do this. So I take these two and I pinch very lightly, and I stroke down like that. So I'm adding just a little bit of pressure, and I just do that over and over. You see how I go off the bottom, and you'll see it starting to thin out mainly in this direction, right? Because I'm doing it whoop, 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 off the bottom, off the bottom, off the bottom. And it only changes a little bit each time. Go off the bottom, off the bottom, off the bottom, right? And then every once in a while, everybody watch this. I'm going to take this because there's a tendency for you to pull in one direction a little bit. I'm going to take this and I'm going to turn it around 180 degrees and keep going off the bottom, over my water, right? I keep getting my hand wet, so it's a little bit like throwing, right? I want to keep getting my hand wet and keep it really slick, and then all the way off the bottom. Don't stop halfway. If something weird starts happening, let's say there's a weird funky spot in the middle, like you start getting a weird thin spot, like how you just take that part and you pinch it off like that. It's gone, right? I just pinch it off the bottom, and now you just keep the good part, and I'll keep going again. Keep doing down, down, down. I can spin it, or don't forget to spin it around every once in a while. And I'm just rubbing it, basically lightly rubbing it, go off the bottom. It has to stay super wet and slick. Super wet and slick, super wet and slick, super wet and slick. Keep dipping your hand in water, super wet and slick. And you can see that it just polishes it up a little bit, makes it look a little bit better. Hold it straight up and down, right? So I'm letting it hang straight down like this. And then go off the bottom, off the bottom, off the bottom. I'm just gonna go a little bit longer. And the main thing is the reason why we like pulled handles, because pulled handles look really good on thrown cups, right? So hand-built, in general, hand-built handles look good on hand-built cups, right? And then these pulled handles look fabulous on thrown cups. So there, and then do a good quick little inspection all the way around to make sure it's looking pretty good. It's looking pretty good. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it onto my table, and you want to do this away from yourself, like in a place where you're not going to be working in a few minutes. So I usually would do it way off to the edge of the table, right? And I would take this handle, and watch very carefully as I'm just going to take this end. So here, let's back this off a little bit. So here, right, holding like that, I'm going to take it and I'm going to flip it over like that and just kind of smoosh it down on my table. And you can see that it starts the arciness for the handle. You see that? So it starts this arc for the handle, and actually I could flatten it out a little bit because that seems like a little high, but you see how that kind of feels kind of handle-like already. Now, if I knew I was going to do a bunch of these, like I had to make at least 2 cups that I need to put handles on today, or let's say I did at least 1 cup. I know I'm going to trim 1 cup, I'd make 2 handles at least. And don't be afraid to throw your handles away, right? To re-wedge them and try again, right? Because it's not very much clay. It happens pretty fast, right? And so don't worry, and don't worry if your first handles don't look good, right? But I wanted everybody to try it today as practice, right? So that you don't forget. Oh, and you're supposed to be thinking about the length of your handle, the width of your handle, right? So if you have a big, chubby, wide cup, you might want to start with a wider piece of clay, right? When you're a wider, bigger coil. Or if your cup has to travel a really long distance, let's say we were going to put a handle on here, right? You would want to start with a longer coil before you started pulling.